I loosely titled it the Spring into Spring. I know it's a little early, but we're springing ahead into the spring season. And tonight we'll have Jason Peak and Julie Cunningham speaking. I am Stacey Berry. If you have any questions, if you get kicked out of the Zoom meeting, if anything's not working, you can email me directly at operations@coldalliance.org. You can also send me direct comments in the chat if you need. Throughout the presentations, you can leave questions in the comment area, or you can raise your hand. For those of you who are not super used to using Zoom, there is a little tab somewhere on your screen, usually at the bottom, labeled reactions. And if you press that, you can raise your hand and a little hand raise will come up. I can see it. I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. And then, as you will have just gotten the notice of, the session will be recorded, and the recordings will be made available to anyone who registered. Special thanks to Yeti as an expedition sponsor for 2023. We would not be functioning without our sponsors, so thanks to them. And then as well, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, since that is where our main speaker, Julie, is working from. And then lastly, we have a special January fundraiser going on. Kevin Konitschek, I say it better in my head, photography. 50% of his proceeds from his January sales of his photos will be going to the RMGA. So feel free to check out his store. If you just Google his name, it comes up. And as well, I will put a link in the comments so that anybody can find it and check it out if they'd like. He's got some beautiful work, and it's not just mountain goats, lots of other wildlife. And with that, I will hand it over to Jason. He is our introductory speaker, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Go for it, Jason. I will stop sharing. And the floor is yours.
Thanks, Stacey. Hey, everybody. My name is Jason Peak. I am the chairman of the board of directors for the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. And I've been asked to talk, and this is our first time kind of going through the webinar series here. So we might have a couple of technical glitches. So apologize in advance, but Stacey and Carla have done a great job putting all this stuff together. And hopefully this kicks off and we get some traction on this, and it'll grow into bigger and better things. So thank you, ladies, for putting this together. Great job. And so here we go. Along the way, I'm probably just going to talk a little bit about Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, a little bit about myself, not a whole heck of a lot, answer any questions, and then hand everything over to Julie, who really is probably who everybody's wanting to hear from today. But I apologize in advance. Marvin, everybody that was on probably heard Marvin talking about a couple of people that got COVID at the sheep show last weekend. I'm one of the people that were hanging around with patient zero, apparently, because I got it, and I'm just kind of coming out of it now. So I apologize in advance if I sound too gravelly or nasally or anything like that. But anyway, with that sheep show, we had a great sheep show. We had a booth set up there for those of you that may have swung by. It was a pretty fun time. We had a great event. Sheep Foundation did very well this year, and I don't know the final numbers yet, but we did get quite a few memberships that came out of that, some renewals, some new folks, and also we auctioned off the Colorado statewide tag on Thursday night, and I think we got $36,000 for that tag. The tag was put out to bid, I think, well, technically a couple of years ago, but last year and this year, Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance won the bid to auction off the tag, and we've done that at Sheep Show the last 2 years, and we've had some pretty good success with it. It was an incredible tag. Hopefully you guys kind of followed along with that, and if not, it's a pretty fun time to kind of watch the momentum build, and as you can imagine, sitting in the audience while that auction's going on is pretty fun. The guy that bought it this year is the same guy that bought it last year. He's quite a character. Between just us kids, he kind of looks like an old Van Halen roadie, but he loves to run up and go kill big goats, and he spent a lot of money, and we're going to try to support him and hope he does well up there, and maybe next year we'll get some competition to drive that price up. So a little bit about Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. It was founded, I think, in 2014 by Pete Munich out of the back of his truck, basically. He sort of got it up and running with the assistance of Wild Sheep Foundation and some of the folks that were key there. In 2015, I think myself and Darren Epp were added to the board of directors. I got suckered into doing it by Adam Foss. Some of you folks might know Adam pretty well. He's one of my best friends. He's a great bow hunter, does all kinds of photography for a lot of different industry companies in the hunting industry. But Adam gave me a call and asked if I want to run, and I had no clue what the hell I was doing, so I said yes, and off we went. At that time, given my professional background, I was kind of more the risk assessment and risk management guy. I put out fires if there were any, but early on there weren't a whole heck of a lot of things for me to try to handle or do. But Darren and I came up through the ranks and went through a lot of growing pains, and we're still sitting here in 2022. We're the old, figuratively and literally, we're the old gray beards of the group. And I think we're both getting a little long in the tooth on this. So we always call each other and yell at each other and get mad at each other about stuff that's going on. But we've got a really close-knit group. We've got a great board. We've got a lot of different facets. It's almost, the way I liken it is to a baseball bullpen. We've got a lot of special arms. We've got a lot of special talents. We've got some situational folks that are tucked in there, and we make a pretty good team. We're going through some changes, and we're setting some pretty lofty goals for ourselves. But that kind of comes with the territory. As the organization grows, so are we, and we've got some challenges. We're always going through growing pains. There are always ways where we're growing a little faster than what our talents and our manpower can handle, but we're doing the best we can. With that, we've got a lot of cool things on the horizon. Memberships, I think Carla can confirm this, excuse me, but I think we're up over 1,000 members now, and I think roughly 40% of that are life members. Of that number, our highest concentration of goat members is in BC. We've got about 118 members in British Columbia, followed closely behind by Montana with 116. So you can tell where the concentration of all of our most of our goat members are, but we've got all kinds of folks that are participating. I know Cameron's on here. He's from the East Coast. We've got somebody popped up from North Carolina. We've got folks all over Alaska. For some reason, Nevada. We've got a transplant story that's successful here in Nevada. That's where I became enamored with goats. So we're a pretty wide-ranging organization. We're the only international organization that's supportive of mountain goats, and we are one of the head affiliates with Wild Sheep Foundation. So in the quarterly magazine, you might see the chapter and affiliate articles that are popped up in there. We're always in there. We always make sure to write a little blurb for our affiliate in that. So some of the stuff that I'm telling you guys, you might have already read about or heard about through the magazine, through the quarterly. As far as, I guess I'm supposed to talk a little bit about my experience with mountain goats and how I got dragged into loving mountain goats the way I did. I had a really incredible archery tag here in Nevada for deer, and I was up in some pretty tall mountains and in a location that I didn't know we had mountain goats. And every night when I would go to sleep and every morning when I'd wake up, I'd hear these rocks above me tumbling down, and I finally walked up to go see what the hell was going on. And it was a really young Billy up there all by himself in late August was this archery tag. And I got within about 10 yards of him, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know we had the damn things up there. This was when I first started bow hunting in Nevada. And so from there, I just kind of went back home and started researching them and looking into it, and couldn't believe the transplant story that we had. It goes way back into the 60s and 70s. I won't bore you too much with the details, but I really got fascinated with that. Along that route, then I just kind of started going with people that had goat tags here. We only give away 7 goat tags in Nevada. And I started looking for, at the time, those lists were public of who drew tags. So I would get a hold of people and try to see if I could go with them and help out, and just kind of along the way figured out how to read goats and pattern goats. And Started getting into them, started bow hunting them. And I think they're probably the coolest animal to bow hunt that's out there. They're tailor-made for bow hunting. They're not as skittish as sheep. They're pretty smart. They're in some pretty tough terrain, but the terrain's built for stalking with a bow. And I think, quite frankly, when you got a bow in your hand, you're going to get closer to them so you can read the terrain better. If you're 400 yards away, it's hard to see a cliff on the backside of them that they're going to fall down if they run that way. But if you're bow hunting, you're right in there tight with them, and you kind of know what they're looking at and where they might fall, where they might run. So you don't lose as many trophies, as far as I can tell, or as far as my experience is concerned. So that's just, they just kind of line up for me. And I've been on quite a few bow hunts for them. I've got, actually, my dumbass has got 2 bow hunts for them scheduled up next year. So I'm not quite sure what I'm getting myself into, but I think all of September next year, I'm pretty much darkened out my calendar to go bow hunting for goats. So with that, maybe lead into a little bit of the RMGA overall vision and kind of what we got on the books coming up. As always, and as probably most of you folks know, we're sort of built on 2 concepts. First is our goat counts. We've always been involved in goat counts with state and federal and provincial entities. We continue to do that, and we're scheduling up. Last year, we with COVID, we kind of got some stuff break up and we lost some momentum, but we're kind of getting back in the swing of things. We are going to set up, and we should have the calendar set up pretty early spring for what our summer is going to look like as far as goat counts are concerned. So you can always count on that. The other tenet that we have for RMGA is our Science and Conservation Committee. And I can't speak highly about those guys enough. They are the backbone of our organization. Anything and everything that we do monetarily, where we support and provide resources, whether it's manpower or funding or anything like that, other than goat counts, we typically run through the Science and Conservation Committee. We've got some high-powered individuals that are involved in mountain ungulate and mountain obligate research and the industry and conservation side of things that are lined up in our Science and Conservation Committee. Some of the most fascinating people. I could sit and talk to some of those guys all day and learn absolutely valuable information about some of this stuff. They're what makes us tick. They tell us where to spend the dollars and where to spend the money and the resources, the boots on the ground, stuff like that. They are involved in, and I don't think we've finalized it, but we've actually got that climate control thing coming, or that climate change paper coming up. Is that right, Carla? Yeah, she's nodding her head. So our climate change, they were heavily invested in some research I won't get into the details, but they were heavily invested in some research that deals with climate change and how it's impacting different mountain ungulates and obligates, especially mountain goats. So it's pretty interesting stuff that's coming up on the horizon. You guys may also remember Laura Balix. She did her, Darren knows a lot more about Laura than I do, but Laura did a great job on a project where I think it was the crossover between the impact between, was it heliskiing, Darren? He's trying to unmute there.
Not heliskiing particularly. It was helicopter training in that particular area.
Helicopter training, that's right. Helicopter training. In specific areas and how it affected mountain goats. And if you, again, talking to these science guys, they'll teach you that there's a difference between ungulates and obligates, and a mountain goat is somebody that stays more stationary. So if things bug them, like helicopters flying over, they can get bumped, and they got to kind of start from scratch. They don't travel near as much as ungulates do. So very fascinating work. We helped Laura with that research. That came out, oh geez, it's probably been 8 or 9 months ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. But she did a great job. And so that's the type of stuff that we're focusing on is science-based research, science-based projects. We're always involved in collaring. We're always providing information or finances to state, federal, and provincial agencies that want to do any collaring projects or counts or anything like that. Relocations is a big one. So that's basically what the dollars and cents are going for. And we're going to keep that momentum. We're going to keep trying to ride that stuff out. That's always been our goal. That's always been one of our missions, and it'll continue to be so. The thing that I've noticed, and the change that I've noticed since I started on the board, and since Darren started on the board, he's probably got a lot of different observations as well. But the quality of the way and the consistency in the way that we track down these opportunities for RMGA resources, and then how we research those and decide whether or not to fund those. It used to be just somebody would get a phone call, and then we would talk about it in a board meeting, and we'd say, yeah, write the check. And that was about it. But we've progressed a lot more since then. We've now got regional representatives involved. They will bring us the information. Somebody will call us out of the blue. A member might call us out of the blue. There are some of the agencies will call us directly. At that point, we will funnel that information off to the Science and Conservation Committee. They then have a discussion about the project. They give us a yay or nay on whether it has their stamp of approval, and then it comes back to the board, and the board votes, and we decide on whether to go forward with it or not. So I think of all the changes that I've seen is we're much more structured. We're much more detail focused and detail oriented. There's a lot more objectivity that goes into it. And I think that's probably the biggest change that I've seen since I've joined the organization. Some of the goals that I think we have coming up over at least the next year, we've obviously got our auction that we're going to be following through with. At Sheep Show, we ended up having a bunch of people out of the blue come up to us and offer support. And I'm not just talking about, donating a backpack or giving us a free bucket of protein powder. We're talking about writing checks and becoming corporate sponsorships and asking about those levels of things. So we've got a lot of meetings that are coming out of that type of stuff. We're going to try to develop some more of that and maybe streamline some of that process a little bit more. We've got, and along with that, we've got a lot of donors that will donate product that will pop up either in member giveaways or at the auction. We got a lot of interest. They're always high ticket items that go well in auctions, hunting trips or rifles, stuff like that always do well. So we get a lot of offers from those. And again, we've got the Colorado Mountain Goat Alliance, and one of the objectives that we have in the long term is to maybe approach other agencies to see if it would be appropriate for us to market and auction off one of their governor's tags or the minister's tag or whatever that state or province might call it, and have RMGA work with that agency to maximize the dollars they're getting. Because if you start going through and looking, for example, the state of Montana, they sell that goat tag at the Montana, I think they sell it at the Montana Wild Sheep Foundation's banquet. And our pitch to the state of Montana would be, we'd probably get a lot more mileage out of it if you give it to us, and maybe we can do something better with it. I'm not saying Colorado goats are any better or any worse, but I can't imagine that a Montana tag should go for any less than a Colorado tag. And we're looking at the other states that have those types of tags too. Nevada doesn't have one yet, but that's something else we could work on for sure. So those are some of the goals, some of the projects. I could go through a laundry list of stuff. I could read you the agenda from our last 5 board member meetings that we've had. But those are just some of the highlights. And I think it's about time probably to get on to Julie. Again, she's probably the most important person everybody wants to listen to, especially with how crappy my voice sounds right now. But I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for joining us on the first time through with this thing. I think Stacy and Carla have worked out all the bugs sufficiently enough that we're going to pull this off without a hitch. They make us look way better than we are. So thank you, ladies. Thanks everybody for joining, and turn you back over to you there, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And hopefully you didn't jinx us, knocking on wood there. Does anybody have any questions for Jason about the RMGA or anything like that? Not seeing any immediate raised hands or anything in the comments. So Julie, would you like me to do a formal introduction for you, or do you want to just introduce yourself and dive into your presentation?
I'd be happy to just dive in, I think.
Okay, I will leave it to you. You can share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay, do you guys see it?
Yep, you're all good.
Okay, good. Now I'll just go from the beginning. Yep, so I'm Julie Cunningham. I am an area biologist in Southwest Montana. I have the good fortune to probably be the area management biologist with the second most goats in the state. My colleague immediately to my west, I think, outdoes me in number of goats. But yeah, I got into the Goat Alliance in 2014 when Pete Munich came into my office. He'd just gone to a Sheep Foundation meeting and said, "Is there anything for goats?" And he was thinking about starting one. And I'm proud to say the first ground count the Goat Alliance officially did was in my area, and you'll see some information from that later in this talk. Pete got that kicked off, and we got a brand new hunting district opened for hunters who've had phenomenal success in this district. It's been a great thing. So what I hope to talk to you guys about today, what I was invited to talk about, I guess, is first mountain goat biology. And then second, I'll talk about mountain goat management. And I am a management biologist. I'm not a research biologist. So I am going to have probably a pretty heavy Montana focus. I have read some of the other states and provinces' management plans, but I might have a little bit of a Montana focus. Other states may have similar stories. And then I'm going to move into the role of the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance and ground counts with how it's influenced our management for hunters directly, and close with how the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance also did a research grant supporting a research project with mountain goats I'm involved in. So I've timed my talk. It should be about a half hour. Are you guys all ready to go? All right, so to start with the biology, these are slides shamelessly stolen from the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance's fantastic educational video on IDing mountain goats. And I really strongly encourage everybody to see this. I hope, since y'all are members, that you've seen it. It's a few years old now, but the data are great. The pictures are great. It's an engaging video that really talks about the population ecology and a ton on how to identify billies and nannies. But to just kick off, you know, if I'm asked to talk about the biology of a species, the first thing I want to do is kind of use the right terminology: nannies and billies and kids, of course, which are born early in the summer. One of the things I point out here is when we think about horn growth, let's start here, because aging your goat is one of the biggest questions I get from hunters is, how old is my goat and how do I tell? So when a kid's born, you don't see any nubs out of those little heads. But by the time they're 6 months old, this is really their first winter, but they're not even a year old yet. But they've been growing horns, and they'll continue to. And you'll see that little horn ring, if you guys can see my cursor. That would be these little marks on this great drawing. Doug McWhirter is a big game biologist, research biologist in Wyoming, who wrote a fantastic publication on how Wyoming manages their mountain goats. And this illustration I really like. It shows, you can kind of see this would be that half-year-old, the baby year. Then this ring is really its second winter, when the goat is 18 months old, or about a year and a half old. So what happens then is the goat isn't putting energy into growing its horns. And so that's what leaves those big rings, is in winter time. There's not good nutrition to support those horn growth. So a little ring will grow there, marking that winter. And so with a mountain goat, really the first 3 years is almost everything. Every year after that adds a little bit of length and probably some mass. And I'll tell you from experience in Montana, after about age 8, as a whole, biologists may start to struggle. The rings get really tight in those bases. But, I'm pretty pleased. If you guys know Randy Newberg, the hunting celebrity, he got a mountain goat. And the Henry's Mountains, which the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance helped us open, our District 361, his goat was 13 years old. I thought it was 12 by the rings. But when we aged it by the teeth, we found it was 13. So that was pretty close. The other way to age mountain goats is this. When I get a mountain goat that comes into me from a hunter, Montana is a mandatory check state, so I get to see a lot of mountain goats. First thing I do is I pull down the lower lip, because you can tell if an animal is under age 4 right away by looking at the teeth. So these are incisors, these central incisors. These are the ones that you pull if you're going to take a tooth and send it to Matson's laboratory that sections those teeth finely and will say how old your mountain goat is. The cool thing of what they do is teeth can grow in rings, kind of like trees. They're called cementum annuli, and you stain them and put them on a slide, and then you can age your mountain goat very exactly. But anyway, these goats will get full grown adult teeth at age 1. So mountain goats lose teeth just like your kids do, just like we've done as humans. We lost our baby teeth and we got our grown-up teeth. The words are deciduous teeth if they're baby teeth. And so these guys will be in a yearling goat, a 1.5-year-old goat, and then these will be baby teeth, and the size will be completely different. So they get their first central incisor at age 1.5. Then they'll get the second one at about age 2.5, the third one at 3, and then the fourth one at 4. So if there's still any type of eruption, and you can see, now goats will get missing teeth when they get old just because they have a hard life. So, but you can tell. If it's a young animal, it still has baby teeth. That's a great way to look at it. In some areas, you can get phenomenal growth on a goat's horns, but it could be a pretty young animal. I have personally measured a 10-inch goat that was 2.5 years old, and it had baby teeth. It was that big. It was pretty incredible. So anyway, it's good to look at those teeth. So those are ways to age your goat. In Montana, we have goats that live up to 16. Our nannies, we've had nannies that reach 16. Billies we've had reach 14. So it's pretty neat. In elk, there's a huge disparity. We'll have males only get up to about 15, but females can get to 25. But in mountain goats, I'm pretty impressed. Males hang in there till about age 14. I mean, that's the oldest that we have in our tooth records so far. And the age of first reproduction is actually a pretty cool thing to talk about. So what that means is, how old is a nanny going to be before she has her first kid? Now, in an elk, they can have their first at 1.5 or 2.5 years old. So they can breed a lot earlier and they live a lot longer. Mountain goats, in some populations, may not breed they may not have their first baby till 4.5 years old or older. And that's what makes these nannies really precious in our populations. In some areas where I work, age at first is about 3.5 years. It could be younger in some populations, but the variability in that rate is pretty interesting, and it might say something about how healthy a goat herd is and how many resources they have. The theoretical ecology of ungulates is, in general, if a population has everything it needs as far as habitat and resources, then age at first reproduction will be younger. If a population is experiencing stresses, particularly nutritional stresses, age at first reproduction will be older. It could be a sign of density dependence. So that's a pretty interesting rate. Mountain goat diet is hugely variable. All these different studies, times a year, the places that they winter, they will eat conifers if they have to. They'll browse, they eat grass. So if you're asking me like what plant to look for so you can find goats, they eat what they need to survive. They do winter often at high elevation on windswept ridges, which makes them much harder to study than bighorn sheep in some areas, because we don't get to observe them as frequently due to their amazing habitat choices. Mortality sources in goats can range from a lot of things. I've seen disease and predation, whether it's eagles knocking kids off of cliffs or mountain lions that have figured out how to hunt them. Even in our area, we've had wolves successfully manage goats. Usually goats have good enough escape terrain that they can get away from those canines, but we've had that happen. So sometimes it's hard to find, though, because of how remote they live. So now to get into a little bit of what exactly is a mountain goat. So we've talked a lot about the biology you're probably familiar with. So I want to challenge you maybe with some biology you might not be. The family Bovidae, that's the cow family, has a subfamily Caprinae. So the kind of the goat subfamily, right? So below the family Bovidae is the subfamily Caprinae. Under that subfamily are wild and domestic sheep. So that's the genus Ovis. So they're like cousins. They're very closely related, right? Closer than cousins, maybe even, so that is one of the reasons disease pathogens can move so smoothly between domestic sheep and wild sheep. But genus is a pretty close degree of relationship. So, I mean, if you think about, if you guys aren't familiar with the taxonomy, genus would be like Canis familiaris for our dogs. So then you could even breed with wolves, Canis lupus, right? So genus says they're pretty closely related with this Ovis. And then their cousins are domestic goats, and then our genus Oriamnos. So Oriamnos americanus is our Latin name of our mountain goats. So they're different genuses, but genuses are pretty closely related. So that's why diseases spread from domestic old world animals can really infect and influence our new world species, our wild species. So we have to be careful with the wild interface with mountain goats and domestics, just like we have to do with bighorn. Here are some in the genus, here are some other caprines in that subfamily Caprinae that I just think are some amazing animals. Almost all these, except for the muskox, are Asian or European or Eurasian. The Himalayan tahr, I think, has got one of the most amazing coats I've ever seen. And some unusual looking animals like the takin there. But of all of these, I'd like you to look at them and just think in your own mind for a second, which one of these looks like it's the most related to a mountain goat? Like, mountain goats are so different looking than bighorn sheep, so they got to be related to something, right? Well, what they're related to is actually the chamois, the Rupacapra chamois. So the Rupacaprins are the rock goats. So I think that's pretty neat. These caprines are cool animals. Mountain goats may have evolved from Central Asian ungulates, but here's some kind of cool paleobiology. I've been getting kind of interested in the Pleistocene extinctions and the Ice Age megafauna in North America, as I work with pronghorn too. So I joke about I work with mountain goats and speed goats. Our pronghorn are very unique as far as their lineage too, and that, having survived the age of the woolly mammoths. So I'm always interested, like, where did our North American megafauna come from? And these mountain goats are uniquely North American, but we believe they moved over from Asia. Their ancestors did, across the Bering Strait. And different sources I found indicate it could be 128,000 years ago to 40,000 years ago. I think one of the challenges is where mountain goats live, it's hard to find fossils. It's hard to have the conditions to fossilize. So their paleo record isn't really strong. But what is cool, and I don't know how many of you guys know this, there was another mountain goat species in North America, but it went extinct around the same time woolly mammoths did, that last Pleistocene extinction event about 11,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago. That species was Oriamnos harringtonii, which lived in the American Southwest. It was in the Grand Canyon area. So it was smaller than Oriamnos americanus. But it went extinct, but our Oriamnos americanus survived. Where our mountain goats were largely native west of the Continental Divide. And there were the states where they were native in provinces are listed here. What's interesting is, and Jason alluded to it earlier, management actions moved goats to other areas where they flourished. So I told you I'm from Montana. So here's a Montana map from a recent publication from some of our actual research biologists. The orange is where the native populations are, and the yellow is where in the 1940s through 60s, we reintroduced mountain goats there west of the, east of the Continental Divide, and habitat that biologists at the time thought was suitable. The purpose of those introductions, of course, was to try to make better hunting opportunity for our hunters. So here's pretty cool. This is some of the history of how we did it. If you see the mountain goat and the panniers on the mule, they had to, they put them in these crates, and they had to tie the horns up to the crates so that the goat wouldn't have its horns free to stab the mule in the butt. They look at these guys running the raft down the river with rapids. That's the South Fork of the Flathead going through our Bob Marshall wilderness. They are floating a hobbled goat out of a wilderness area in a raft. And then up in the corner, that flying service out of Missoula, they're stuffing a goat into the back of a fixed wing aircraft. So these goats are pretty tough to endure that kind of treatment. And if you read the journals of some of these older folks, this is, like I say, the 1940s. Most of the transplants went on 1940s through 60s. And you read their stories and journals, it took them weeks to do some of these captures. The captures were really challenging. You know, getting your hands on a live goat was hard. So that's why some of our founding populations didn't start with very many animals, because capturing them and moving them was really challenging. I saw I had something pop up in the chat. Oh, cool, thanks. I just want to be sure if you had questions, I answered it as we go. We're a small group, we can have fun. So here in Montana, this map, and I hope nobody's colorblind. If you are, the larger circles with the outline, they're green. I lifted this map from another publication that recently came out of Montana State University. This is where the mountain goat translocations happened in Southwest Montana and some parts of Wyoming. So those big green circls are where we dump goats on the mountains. All those red dots are where goats went on their own. Goats percolated all the way into Yellowstone Park and Grand Teton. Goats showed an amazing amount of resilience and ability to colonize new habitat. My computer froze. Oh, there we go. So in Montana, here's an amazing piece of history for us. As once upon a time, we didn't think hunters would deliberately go up in the mountains to mountain goat country and hunt mountain goats when there was elk and deer and other things that were much easier to get. So Montana didn't pay a lot of attention to mountain goat harvests in the early days. And we allowed unlimited licenses. I mean, if you think about it, prior to the 60s, our population was way lower, the roads were less, things were less accessible. We just didn't think people were going to be in those wilderness extreme areas hunting mountain goats. So once upon a time, we didn't regulate mountain goat harvest. But all through the 60s and into the 70s, licenses went to limited draws. However, as you can see from these population graphics, these regions of Montana, regions 1 and 2 and 3 have native herds. Well, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, and 4 all have native herds. And the native herds aren't doing really great. But meanwhile, the introduced herds, particularly in region 3, are going bonkers. And you know, the area where I'm a wildlife biologist is fortunately one of those places where they were introduced. So the goats that I'm managing are looking pretty hot. So your next question, of course, is, well, why the heck is that? And from what I've read, including from all other states and provinces, especially those who manage native and non-native mountain goats both, why are introduced populations doing better than the native herds? And there's no clean answer. And any answer is probably going to be very site specific, because different herds are probably going to have very different influences. But some hypotheses include disease. We know Mycoplasma ovipneumonae, or MOV, is a respiratory pathogen that can infect bighorn sheep and cause massive die-offs. And there's increasing evidence from Dr. Peregrine Wolf out of Nevada, from Blake Lowry, who published in the greater Yellowstone area. MOV could be a big deal with mountain goats too. We just might not know enough about it yet. So for me, if you asked me, I'd say I want to look at disease. The next thing, if you asked me, I'd want to look at is predation. You know, in Montana, if you looked at the mountain goat population going down and you looked at a map of bald and golden eagles going up, bald and golden eagles were almost eradicated with DDT. But when that was banned in the 60s, they grew exponentially. And as we know, eagles can predate on mountain goat young, knock them off cliffs, things like that. As we talked about with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance's climate change position statement, there is a lot of unknown about climate change and how it influences mountain goats, but also how climate can influence habitat, including fire suppression in high alpine areas. There's also something called a small population risk. If you guys follow biology, you might know the term Ali effect, which if you are at a small population, say you only have 10 nannies, what if just by random chance, those 10 nannies all got pregnant and had 8 male offspring? That sucks for the population, because you need to have female offspring to have babies. But if you're at a small population and, you know, every baby's a flip of the coin, is it going to be a male or a female? random stochastic events like that can actually keep a small population low or drive it toward extinction. That's one of the reasons wildlife biologists like me don't like to see small populations. It makes us worried. They can blink out. And then, of course, there could be unknown genetic effects that go along with that. Disturbance is a big question, you know, recreation, heli-skiing, all the things that can influence. I mean, goats have a hard enough life. Do they need to be running away from us doing heli-skiing and things? In some places, one of the questions with hunter harvest is, has it been targeted too much onto the female segment of the herd? So you'll see in parts of Montana, new regulations that are trying to guide harvest away from harvesting females. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. That video that I showed you the link to at the start of this, all the education and outreach the Goat Alliance has done. If you follow their Facebook page and they have the, okay, is it a Billy or a nanny quiz? What I have noticed in my data, and sometime I can show you guys if anybody wants to see it, the last 10 years, the number of nannies in harvest has declined. The percent of harvest that's nanny has gone down. And I think that means hunters are more educated, more able to select, and more careful about choosing billies. And I think that that's going to be great for our herds. But who knows what's happened in the past? Nannies might have been easier to harvest, and maybe some of those places where we had too much harvest took too many females. And then, of course, cumulative effects, all these things combined. Meanwhile, introduced populations are exploiting totally good, brand new habitat. So if you guys are familiar with the idea of a carrying capacity being some kind of nutritional ceiling, and you put new animals on this landscape and they're way below the carrying capacity because they're brand new to this unused landscape, they can just grow exponentially. So in some areas, we figure that's what's happened with these introduced populations. And they continue to colonize further areas. So moving to kind of mountain goat management at Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, many states and provinces have their own management plans. So if you're, you know, just a hunter or goat enthusiast in any state, you know, it's worth it to just grab one of your management plans. Ours has a fancy name. It's a structured decision-making document. And oops, sorry, how many, I'm reading in the comment, how many populations in Montana have both introduced and native mountain goats? Do they have issues? That's a really good question about augmentations in goats. And I do know of one population where they tried to do augmentation and it may have inadvertently introduced some disease. We are just learning about the roles of pathogen exchange between populations, and that's a big risk if you're going to be doing augmentations. So I think maybe what you meant is how many like regions in Montana, like region 3, we have, you know, introduced goats and we have native goats, and that's, you know, they're pretty separated. All right, thank you for the chat questions. But yeah, so our mountain goat decision-making strategy includes strategies for goat management, climate and habitat models. This is available on our website if anybody wants to look it up. We include thinking about habitat management, predator management strategies, and we include, you know, in some places we might need to do introductions or we might need to do augmentations, but we need to consider the risks of intra and interspecies pathogen exchange. And what that means, goats could give sheep disease, sheep could give goats disease. So I think we need to be really careful when we're mixing mountain ungulates. Goats could give other goats disease. If we're doing an augmentation and we take goats from a population that has disease, like I can tell you one right now is the Gallatin Mountain Range has MOV. If we took goats out of the Gallatin and moved them on top of other goats, we could cause a die-off. We got to be careful with stuff like that. Okay, so anyway, one thing I'm really proud of in our state, I will say, is in some places and in some jurisdictions, mountain goats being non-native have caused consternation or questions about goats impacting plant communities or fragile alpine environments. And as a result, in some places, mountain goats were determined to be non-native and needed to be removed. But in Montana, the strategy that we're taking is this. The goats that are introduced in Montana are still Montana goats. They came from Montana stock. And therefore, they could restore some of those native herds again, where they're flourishing. For we could essentially capture some and transplant back to the places where they're struggling. So, and then furthermore, the places where they've been introduced provides the most hunting opportunity and the most viewing opportunity. And we think we value that. The structured decision, so I realize you guys don't know what I look like. There's a picture of me. Our structured decision-making plan identified research and management needs, including population dynamics. We're getting better at counting mountain goats. As a result, we're really struggling pulling together trend data, just the basic population dynamics. We know we need to improve. We know we need to get more herd health assessments and get at pathogens. So I'll tell you, I'm central in Southwest Montana. We've sampled 3 herds for MOV and 2 of the 3 have it. This is an example. This picture is, and it's a sad picture, but I wanted to show it to you guys because pneumonia is a real deal. This goat died, this is a nanny. She died in the Gallatin Range. That was biologist Karen Lovelace out of the Livingston area. That Livingston area is the one that manages the most mountain goats in the state. We went out together and we did a necropsy and determined this goat died of Mycoplasma open pneumoniae. So we are furthermore going to be looking into habitat models and management and also habituation and recreation management. But to start with population dynamics, just figuring out how many goats are on the mountain. Count data is really important. This is a picture I took from a recent flight, I think just this last year. Sometimes the goats just are right on the ridge and they really pop. I need to get some better glass and maybe I can make some prettier pictures, but goats can be susceptible to overharvest. The mortality of hunting can be additive. It's ideal if more males get taken, but I factor in some females will get taken. And one thing I wanted to say just in front of some folks is, I was totally on this bandwagon of get all hunters choosing males. But then I had a couple hunters trickle through my office who really wanted to get a billy. And they accidentally got a nanny and they had their once in a lifetime goat hunt and they came in with their trophy and they were like apologetic and embarrassed. And I'm like, hey, this is still your trophy. I still want you to be proud. Don't worry, you're not going to crash the population. When I issue the number of licenses I issue, there's going to be some nanny harvest. I just wouldn't want a hunter to feel embarrassed or bad about what they get. We want to educate hunters to try to get those billies, but we also want them to be proud of what they got out and did and accomplished and got their trophies. So when I issue licenses, I'm in an introduced area where goat populations are doing pretty well right now, thank goodness, knock on wood. So I will issue roughly 4 to 5% of the count for the herds where I manage. In Montana, in a native herd area, our biologists out there will do 1 to 2% of their herds. So they will have a much more conservative harvest rate. I was talking to a Colorado biologist and their harvest rate's even higher. So these introduced herds in some places can sustain some pretty high harvest rates. But I think if somebody has high harvest rates, they really need to be on top of doing their counts. Other reasons count data are important is you want to get at kid counts. Pneumonia can really affect the reproduction. Like pneumonia can take out kids. There can be kid pneumonia. So we want to make sure that they're having plenty of kids. Billy counts are important. Are there plenty of billies available for hunters to hunt? So getting good mountain goat counts is harder than you'll think. So look at these graphs or these pictures. There's 70 goats in this one picture, goats around this archway in the other. They really pop out, these white goats in these green fields. That is not always what it's like. And some of my colleagues like to survey goats in winter, and you're probably thinking like, oh my gosh, counting a white animal on white snow makes no sense, but they leave a lot of tracks in the snow. So you can follow them and find them. I like to fly in summer, but sometimes counts aren't this easy. Like, look at this. Okay, so I'm gonna put this up for a second and let you guys study it. This is the wall of the Sphinx, a huge mountain rock feature, and there's goats in this picture. And see how many you can see. I'm gonna give you a hint. Hopefully you guys are getting to pick out a couple. Here's the total. So this was an example from my helicopter. And one of the things I would point out is like, look at this goat in that crack. Sometimes when I fly helicopters over these goats, they don't like it. They don't like things coming at them from above. And they run into caves, they run into cracks and they hide. Or they run under trees and they hide. So sometimes goat counting can be really hard from the air and from the helicopter. And that's where the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance can come in. So kind of moving into the next phase of the presentation is I've worked with the Goat Alliance extensively for 9 years, and ground counts can really help. So this map on the right is the Bridger Mountain Range, where we've done quite a number of ground counts. And what we do is we send observers out the same day. So all the observations happen within the same time frame. And then I can go through and remove duplicates by location, group size, time of observation. And I have a little algorithm that I use, and I feel pretty confident about it. And, you know, I feel like I axe a lot of points. But one of the cool things about ground counts is it allows observation during dusk when flying wouldn't work. Here's one of our young volunteers, a really awesome 14-year-old nephew of one of our game wardens who hiked like 14 miles up this mountain. These goats came out of the trees at night. I would never have seen them from the helicopter. But because he was out there in the evening spotting and watching and quiet, and these goats came out and we got a great count. So I'm a management biologist. Like I said, I'm not a research biologist. If you guys really want to get into the science of citizens counts, there's a couple papers. Jesse DeVoe wrote a bunch on double observer methodology in the Greater Yellowstone, but also Jamie Belt from Glacier National Park is like top of the line in citizens ground counting, and she's got more statistics power than I do right now. And they use a lot of statistics with double observer methodology, and they can get great estimates. What I feel like I'm going to do is I'm going to get a defensible minimum count, and then if I set harvest quotas from a defensible minimum count, it's going to be naturally conservative, which is what we want with goats. I see a question popped up. Ever considered using drones to enable counting efforts? Although that's a good idea, I think we need to be careful. I've observed people flying drones over goats in the Bridgers, and the goats did not like it. I think they looked too much like eagles. The goats freaked out. But if we use drones professionally and carefully, I think there could be some good methods. I will tell you, I experimented with a company had heat sensing. This is an aside because of your question. There was a company who had heat sensing cameras. And I thought, wow, if goats are hiding in the trees, maybe that'll help pop them out. And this company did a flyover of the Spanish Peaks. I said, let's do it in winter, because then the thermal signature of the goats will be so much different than their surroundings. But the goats were so well insulated, they had a hard time finding them. So like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Okay, so the citability or observability is always one of the biggest questions. How many goats are out there that were not observed? You can get at that with that double observer methodology like Jamie did. I've heard of people doing a flight with paintball guns and paintballing mountain goats and then flying again and seeing how many paintball goats they saw or didn't see. But one thing I'll tell you is I'm a management biologist and I like to keep things simple. So here's something simple. In 2018, Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance did a ground count on a unit of Montana's. This is the Henry's Mountains, the one I talk about all the time. The Henry's Mountains. Our ground count had 58 goats and 14 kids. Well, Henry's Mountains borders into Idaho. So Idaho Fish and Game 2 weeks later did a helicopter count, an intensive one. They got 57 goats, 14 kids. What I like about this is not only the numerical agreement, but also the ratios, because we're getting those kid ratios. So our citizens observers were not only doing a good job getting the totals, they were doing a good job getting the ratios. Okay, I'm gonna look at a question here. Oh, cool. You use thermal with military stuff with mule deer counts. That's awesome. I really think there's a future with that. I've seen it look great with elk and things. I think I could use it with mule deer counts. I would love that. That's really cool. And the technology is probably a lot better. I mean, this was 15 years ago when we did this. I probably should have said it in my introduction. I've worked with FWP for about 16 years now, so technology is changing. And I'll note that this little nanny in the back is radio collared, so if you saw that. So to tie back with Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, the value of these ground counts and how that ties citizens directly into the management of the wildlife. I've done 7 surveys with the Goat Alliance over 9 years in my part of Southwest Montana and 2 hunting districts. I've found them to be really, really successful, but the study areas I choose are kind of island mountain ranges. They're accessible with trails. You know, they're discrete. It means they're finite. It's not like this enormous never-ending wilderness where one herd or population just merges into another and into another. So I have a very good idea of what I need to achieve, and with 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 groups, I can achieve it. We can achieve it. I'm sorry. Volunteer training sessions are vital, but they're also a lot of fun. It's a great time to show the Goat Alliance videos, for the Goat Alliance to talk about some of the things you guys do best with your education and outreach and the engagement of the citizens. But one thing I want to point out is these counts are replicable and they're constantly improving. This Henry's Mountains goat, I put in the population graphic there on the bottom. I don't think the goats are growing at that rate. I think we're getting better at counting them, because some of these early counts were just a couple of people out there saying, hey, there's goats in the Henrys. It's like, oh, really? There's goats? Well, let's start looking. And as we start looking, we're like, oh, they're there too. They're there too. You know, so we get better. But what's really neat is, yeah, these last 3 counts in the Henrys have all been Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance ground counts. So pretty cool stuff. I also want to put out a plug. I don't know, I think most folks in the audience here are probably hunters, but I would say in front of any other management biologist, there is a limitless intrinsic benefit to engaging the people where you work. The education and outreach to future and current hunters. We always get license holders. This fellow here on the far left held one of the licenses for that unit. And he was a part of it. He was excited to be there and scouting and learning and practicing because he wanted to get a billy. And it's so fun. You can get practice. I've had hunters come from 500 miles away and they come to one of these ground counts and they say, oh man, I've never had an opportunity to hunt goats, but this is the next best thing. I'm out there in goat country. I'm scouting them. I'm watching them. I'm getting their behavior. But as a wildlife management biologist, one of the things that I find really important is involving the public who own the wildlife in their wildlife management. And I think that's pretty cool. Oh, chat, hang on, I'm gonna look at that chat. Braden drove from Seattle to, hey, thank you, Braden. That's awesome. All right, so in Southwest, the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance collaborations have been huge for the mountain goat management in my districts. As I've already mentioned a couple times, because of Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance involvement, we added a whole hunting district. And I think over the years, it went from 2 licenses to 3 licenses. I was going to raise it to 4 licenses, but Idaho wants a license. So now citizens of Idaho are going to have a goat license because of what the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance has done. And so every year, if we added that up, 2 a year, then 3 a year, and then 4 in a year, people are benefiting. If we had a less than 1 club for mountain goats, we're kicking people out of it. But the next phase of the talk is the Goat Alliance also has research grant programs, and Jason covered this a little bit. So the last phase of my talk is to tell you about the Bridger Mountains mountain goat research effort. And I'm pretty excited. Montana's had good mountain goat research in the past, but never with modern collar data, with old VHF collars. So if you guys, I was telling you about how much technology changed just in my 16 years at FWP. VHF collars were like, you had to go find the animal and you could triangulate or you'd fly and you'd get a point every 2 weeks or month, however you could fly. But these modern GPS collars are phenomenal. So this is our first kind of modern mountain goat study, and Goat Alliance provided us one of the research grants to support the recreation component of this. So thank you to the Goat Alliance for that. And here's a sneak peek to some of the results. I don't think I've shared too much of this, so hopefully this will be new to people. The Bridger Mountains are in southwest Montana, so you can see in the bottom right, the area of interest. We're just north of Yellowstone National Park. There's the community of Bozeman. The Bridgers are our back door. It's also proximate to those 2 other herds that have the MOV. That Gallatin mountain goat that I showed you guys that was dead of MOV, that's just straight south of here. And then the Crazy Mountains over to the east of the Bridgers, which is one of Montana's biggest, known mountain goat units, they have MOV too. Recreation is intense through this district. And the habitat of this district is manageable. So if we learn things about mountain goat habits or habitats, this is not wilderness, and there are access points and collaborations with the Forest Service, so we could do logging projects if need be. So this is a pretty cool little study area. And to tell you a little bit about the Bridger mountain goats, they were introduced in 1969. There are 13 goats started our population. These goats came from the gates of the mountains, and they appear to be thriving despite enormous recreation pressures. I think we have about 120 goats in this island mountain range, and they grow some of the biggest goats in our state. We just got our Boone and Crockett scorer, Fred King, some of you guys might know that name. He scored a 56-inch goat that came out of the Bridgers recently. We regularly get 10-inch billies. The average horn length is over 9.5 inches. Average. This is one of the primo hunt units in Montana, in my opinion, if you want horns. And unfortunately, though, this is what's amazing. How many hunted populations do you know? We offer 5 tags a year on 120 goats. And yet billies will walk right up to you like this during the summer. Now, obviously, come hunting season, they figure you out a little bit better, but we have habituation issues in this herd. And let me show you recreation. So what I did was I overlaid the Bridgers with goat blobs in blue, where the darker blue shows you some of a sneak peek from our GPS collars. This shows you where the goats want to be. And that's the ridge of the Bridgers, right along the ridge, right along the spine. And all those pink things, there are spider web trails everywhere. And I'll tell you another thing. Those are the mapped official Forest Service trails. People make trails wherever they want out there. It is a very heavily recreated mountain. It is ludicrous. I've listed there all the amount of things people go up to the Bridgers to do. And some of it is almost unbelievable. I was up there backpacking one time and ran into a guy backpacking with his house cat. You just never know what you're going to find. So there's about 120 miles of trails for roughly 40 square miles of habitat. That's quite a bit. This is the little nocturnal picture of goats is a picture I took from my campsite. I was up there doing a grouse survey one time and camped out, and goats invaded my camp at about midnight and stayed until 4 in the morning, licking out of the fire pit and chewing the charcoal in the fire pit. But this is why dogs have been gored. Some people who don't know better will be in their tents and let their dog out at night, and then the dog might get, pester a kid and get stabbed by a goat. So these things are happening in the Bridgers. I figured you guys might want to get a few pictures of what the captures look like for how we put the collars out on these animals. So this research project's ongoing. So instead of giving you a ton of results, I'm showing you a little bit of process. We open up their jaws and spread to give them swabs. We swab their throat, their tonsils, their noses for that MOV to try to see if they have disease. You can see they're blindfolded, hobbled, and they have little hoses on their horns to keep us from getting stabbed. The helicopters sling them into us at a high elevation place where we work. But let me show you the helicopter captures, what it looks like. Can you guys see my cursor? Stacy, can you tell me? Yeah, okay, good. So my cursor's over the helicopter. I'm going to move my cursor to show you the goat at the bottom of the screen. So there's the goat. So let me show you the next slide. The helicopter needs to throw a net on that animal. Now you can imagine with those blades going, and so you can see this guy hanging out the window of this helicopter. You got to be like less than 20 feet from that goat to throw the net's on a net gun. So it shoots out of a gun, the net does on this animal. But because the prop wash and the winds from the propellers, you got to be around top of that animal. Well, look where that animal wants to be. It wants to be in this rock face. These guys operate with just no margin for error. We have a phenomenal capture crew. Rick Swisher from Colorado, if any of you guys are from there. Here's the pilot, and then there's the mountain goat again. Look how close they had to get. I wasn't able to capture the exact moment of the netting, but there's the helicopter. This guy jumps out of it. The goat's in a net. His job is to get on that goat as fast as he can and get it hobbled and blindfolded. It slides down to the bottom of this hill, and they're able to get on it and walk back up to the helicopter. And then they load it to the helicopter and bring it to us for processing. So this nanny on the left here, she's wearing a collar, but in their winter coat, that collar is hard to see. In their summer coats, you can see the collars, but in their winter coats, look how shaggy she is. That's why we spray painted their butts orange, so that the helicopter, if it went over them, would see that mark and not recapture that individual. Since I know I don't have a camera, that's a better picture of me. So that's me. We tried to do some summer captures. Our colleagues in Glacier have had really good success with capturing them over salt bait. I told you the amount of recreation though, so we had to like sit in the woods and hide and pull the string when the goats come into the trap, because otherwise, you know, a goat would be in that trap and people would be coming by. But if you're not familiar with what a clover trap is, it's basically a big metal box with nets all around it and a big heavy bar drops capturing the animal inside the box, then we can drug it. I got to tell you, it's pretty funny. I told you the amount of recreation in the Bridgers. These goats are nocturnal most of the time. I showed you a daylight photo so you could see what the trap looks like. But most of the time they came in at night. So we got these night vision goggles from our game wardens and we're like staked out in the woods watching this trap at like 1 a.m. And there's people out partying and you hear people woo and people like walking through the woods right by the trap. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I say something, it's going to scare these people crazy or they're going to shoot me. So I think I'll just like stay real quiet and hope they don't see me. You know, you feel kind of creepy. So I just want everybody to be careful and you're recreating the woods. You never know when a biologist is just like lurking in the bushes. But we were able to capture some goats in these traps. And here's one we caught at 11 o'clock at night, getting blood and swabs and collars. But it was a phenomenal amount of work for not a lot of return. The captures from the helicopters are much, much faster. And so far, we've captured 15 goats and collared 14. I'm really hopeful that in the next few weeks, we're going to have a helicopter help us capture more. This was probably one of the best days at work I've ever had. There's just this team of 4 of us up there, and they just brought us goats all day long. It was just the best day ever. I guess there was 5 of us. I'm taking that picture. But I told you guys about technology. You know, those old days of the VHF collars were first, and then we had GPS collars, but they were store on board. They'd be on the animal for years, and then they'd drop off the animal, and then you'd hike out and go get them, which was a lot of fun. It was like an Easter egg hunt. And then you'd download the data and be like, oh, this is where that animal went. Or you'd be devastated and disappointed when you found out the collar failed and all those years. What's really cool now is this is what it looks like. I can pull this up on my cell phone and I can look up where these animals are, not in real time. You know, they do uploads every, couple hours or, maybe once a day they'll upload the locations. But what's really neat is I can look at these pathways and see how these animals are using the mountain in real time. And so I'm able to show you data right now of what we're learning. And obviously we'll get more data and it will change. But this kind of web-based software and these satellite links, the way that technology has grown and helped our field is really cool. And I just wanted to show you guys this, get a little insight into what I get to see. So I'm happy to report that so far, we haven't found MOV in the Bridgers. And I think that I've told you guys about how big the horns grow in the Bridgers and how they're thriving despite the recreation pressures. They seem to be thriving. The Bridgers are a herd we should really be working to protect. There's often been questions or challenges of we should do this in the Bridgers or that in the Bridgers. And I will do whatever I can to speak for the mountain goats in the Bridgers, because I think what we got there is pretty cool. They do not have MOV that we've detected yet. Our disease ecologist wants us to get a sample of 30 before we can say that they don't have MOV. So I'll put that little asterisk on there for you. We started the study 2 years ago. We've only had 1 mortality. Goats are amazing. The 1 mortality was a nanny who had an injury, not capture related. It was about 1.5 years late after she was captured. She had an injury in her side. I don't know if she'd been poked by another goat or had taken a fall, but she had an injury that had gone septic. So hopefully we'll get additional captures. And then the recreation work we have, and this is what the Goat Alliance did for us, was the Goat Alliance helped us purchase a whole bunch of trail counters. So we're going to get estimates of how people are using those trails. And what that's going to do is hopefully we'll see, well, we know when the goats are out there using the trails, when are the people, is there temporal separation? Is that why the goats are nocturnal in certain areas? Or is there any avoidance at a fine scale? So thank you to the Goat Alliance for that. And then this is maybe a little premature, but I felt the need to go ahead and plug, look for a Bridgers count again this year, 2023. I know we're doing a count after count after count in the Bridgers, but if we've got the momentum and the enthusiasm, I would love to see it. And here's one of the reasons why. We've got collared animals out there right now, and I know where they are. And I know if they were available to be seen by people. So what I was able to do last year is I asked all the volunteers, hey, could you tell if that animal had a collar or not? So I'll give you a rough estimate. So say we had 10 collared animals out there and our observers saw 8. That means you can say roughly we saw 80% of the goats. So then I can say, oh, 90 counted animals is 80% of our total. Here's our total estimate. So that's, back of the napkin math, but it's helpful for me as a manager. It's a rough mark recite estimate. So you can read my report if anybody wants to for more details on that method. But I think while we have collared animals out, this will help us study the efficiency of ground counts and observers in doing these counts. It can help us get at that question of observability and citability. So please consider, and these dates might change. Like Jason said at the start, we haven't finalized, the Goat Alliance hasn't finalized surveys yet. This is a placeholder. Just pencil it in if you wish, and stay tuned for more information. And I thought I would close with a little goat getting up. This is after our capture, we're unhobbling it. The blindfold, one thing you have to make sure of is you don't want that blindfold clipped on that goat. The worst thing in the world would be if an animal got away with the blindfold on it. This animal was never drugged. So we pull that blindfold off, pull the hobbles off, and there she stands looking at us like, what the heck? Her face is a little dirty, but off she goes. And with that, closing slides, how to contact me. I really prefer email communications. I'm a little faster on email than phone calls. And then once again, a shout out to the Goat Alliance's Goat Biology and Management website. I really appreciate that educational resource. So yeah, that's my talk. Any questions, everybody?
Wow, that was fascinating, Julie. I really like that you. I like to see the capture process. I always wondered how that went.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Back to when you were talking about populations, and I've heard it before. Population has been a concern in lots of goat populations. If like the transplants tend to do better, like the introduced herds tend to do better, why isn't it done more? Like I know it was done quite often in, like you said, in the 60s ish.
Yeah.
Why isn't it done more? Why isn't it considered?
That's a good question. I think to some degree, at least I can say in Montana, we talked about that on the SDM process. There were some places goats were introduced to where they failed. So they didn't succeed in all places they were introduced. So one thing we ask ourselves is, what is suitable habitat? And I think that right now, one of our focuses trying to restore, like the Bob Marshall goat population was historic and vital to our state, the Bitterroot Mountains. We want to put the effort into restoring our native herds most right now, but making new herds is still on the table. And you know what? Goats surprise us. The South Dakota, what's the part? Mount Rushmore. Like who would have guessed? Who would have guessed that would be suitable habitat? We have a funky place out in Montana called Square Butte, out in the middle of this prairie, there's this kind of big mountain feature and the goats love it. So it's kind of interesting where they succeed or fail. So that's a good question for us to discuss programmatically, and different biologists might give you different answers, but that's just some of my initial thoughts.
Oh, and that makes sense. No, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. If anybody has any questions, now is your kind of last shot. I did share the link, like I mentioned, that fundraiser at the beginning by Kevin Konishek. I have posted his shop on Etsy if anybody would like to take a look. I'm not seeing anything in the comments. If anybody else would ask. But otherwise, thank you so much. This is when you'd get your round of applause if we were doing it live. But yeah, I think with that, Carla, do you have any other final comments?
Just don't forget to put the dates again in the dates for the next webinars are February 15th, March 15th, and April 19th. And we'll be talking about a few other projects that we funded as well, but also some hunting adventures and Darren's going to talk about photography for us. So there'll be a few different things for different tastes out there. And if you have ideas for webinars that you'd like to see or speakers or information, then please do email Stacy and let us know. And if you guys want to go a titch past April, we're good with that too. Depends on what everyone has going on. But like we said at the beginning, this is a nice way for us to be able to connect and get to know some people. And then at each session, there should be a board member that's going to join and do to get them a bit better as well. And then Stacy and I'll probably always be around helping to host them as well. And it's nice to talk to people like Julie. Julie's been freshly nominated and appointed to our Science and Conservation Committee, and now you can see why. So it's nice to do some work like this so we can see some of the other projects that Julie's been working on, and obviously very committed to mountain goat preservation, conservation, and management in the state of Montana. And now she's sharing beyond with everybody, which is awesome. So thank you, Julie, for all the time you're giving us, and hopefully we're supporting you in the work you're doing so that it makes worthwhile for you. But also just, the knowledge that you've gained and your years of experience and being able to share with everyone is fantastic.
Thank you.
Cool. Everyone have a great night, and we'll hopefully see you in February. Looking forward to it.
Yep, keep your eyes open on your emails and on social media. We'll be posting some links there. So
Awesome. And Stacy will be sending out the link for this.
Yep.
So if you had anyone else that you wanted to lure to the next one, please do encourage them to join us.
awesome.
Awesome. Have a good
Thank
night,
you,
guys.
everyone, and have a good night.
That's nice. It's cool that ends there.